All right, all right. We have hit the live button, and we should be going live here. And, you know what? Let me check one thing here. No, that's good. All right. It says low internet bandwidth. Wow, that's, I'm using my high-end internet, and, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. Should still be good.
Yeah.
And if not, we'll, torment Comcast on the show if we have other issues. So,
Like they care.
Probably not. But we're paying for very, very high. It's supposed to be 1 gig, and I'm sorry, but streaming video on Facebook only requires like 5 meg. And I've got a 1 gig line here, and we can't. It's telling me that it's running too slow. I mean, it's doing fine now, but yeah, unbelievable. So today we're going to have a little bit of fun, and we need to share this out to a few places, Steve, to make sure that everybody gets access to this, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I shared it to the Video Marketing Madness page and to live event marketers.
Oh, good. And it seems everybody is joining in here. Make fun of Steve for eating on the air, because you can probably hear it very well.
Big Mama's soul food.
And there are a lot of people on here already that, can hear you chomping away.
The chicken wings are good.
Oh, good. That's exciting to hear. I'm glad you like.
I do.
And now, before we get started today, one thing I wanted to... Have you noticed, Steve, that... do you have the new Facebook?
I guess. Yeah, I didn't... You mean the app, the phone app, or
No, just on the the new look and feel of the new Facebook.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really notice anything. Tell me about it.
Well, they've just remodeled the entire thing. It's totally different.
Did they? Wow.
Oh yeah. It's completely different. But one thing they've done that makes it a little easier is, dang it, and I goofed it up anyway. What an idiot. They make it a lot easier, even though I just screwed it all up, to share to like all your groups and stuff. And apparently by all groups, I'm only seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For some reason right now, I'm only seeing a handful of them. But normally you see all your groups, including ones that you just belong to, that you can share your stuff with. But for some reason, most of my groups aren't showing up right now, which, as I praise them, of course this happens. But yeah, it just allows you to share things out a lot quicker and easier to your groups, which is kind of neat. So I just shared it to a bunch of groups in that very short period of time that we were just chatting there, versus having to do it one at a time over and over and over again. So that's kind of nice.
Groovy.
Nice. All right, today we're going to have a fun episode. We're going to talk about where we've come from and maybe where we're going, where we're at, and our history as we do our Retro Video Mania. We need to have an echo effect for that.
Mania.
Mania, la, la, la.
Mania, ma.
No. Retro video. Okay.
That's pretty good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
all right. We're going to be talking about where video has come from in the last, 20, 30 years and the things that we have. So now we've got all sorts of great things that we did not have when I graduated high school, for instance. And we're going to talk all about where we've come from and how we've gotten here and all the great things that got us to this point. And let's just start the show so we can do that. So here we go.
Alrighty. Okay.
And in 5, 4, 3. On today's episode of Video Marketing Madness, we're going to talk about Retro Video Mania. And what that is, well, we're going to talk about all things video from the past 30 years, how we got to the point we're at now, and compare way back in the 90s or even the 80s to what we have right now when it comes to producing video. And boy, oh boy, what a difference a few years has made. And speaking of differences, recently, Steve, I switched from QuickBooks to FreshBooks to manage my business. Did you know that?
Wow.
You should. We've talked about it before.
Well, yes, I did know that because you've talked about it before.
Indeed.
How's that worked out for you, Ray?
It has worked amazingly well, and that's why we're using them as the company that is making today's show possible, because they provide tremendous software for businesses, for your accounting, for your invoicing. You can even send out things like proposals and estimates and have your clients approve them before you get started, which is a really, really great thing that's inside of there. You can have recurring payments, so they put their credit card in once and they pay every single month. You send the invoice every month. It is a beautiful thing, and we absolutely love it. It automates so many different things, and it allows you to take the payments. Love it much more than QuickBooks. Sorry, QuickBooks. I know that you're popular, but I think this is just so much better. And if you want to see how much better, well, you can get a free trial right now. Head on over to raiselinks.com/FreshBooks. FreshBooks. And when you do that, you don't even have to put your credit card in. You just create an account and try it out for 30 days. If you love it, keep it. If you don't, just walk away. But I highly recommend you try it. raiselinks.com/FreshBooks for the easiest way to start managing your business and getting more money. We all love money. And speaking of money, we got a theme song that truly is money, and we're going to hit it right now. Here we go.
He's Ray the video guy, yeah, Ray the video guy. His skill is where it's at, even if he's a little fat. He's filled with video expertise and has so much knowledge that you need. His YouTube ninja tricks can make your marketing so sick. He's Ray the video guy, yeah, Ray the video guy.
And it's the radio show about video marketing madness with Ray the video guy.
That's me.
And I'm Steve Sleeper. Yeah,
that's him.
And that's me. And go VMM, the landing page where you can see all the podcatchers, Apple Podcasts being probably the primary one, and then how to get social with us: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter.
Getting social with it.
Plurk.
Nah. Getting social with it.
Getting social with it.
Nah. And speaking of, nah. Well, that was a song a long time ago, and we're going to go into the Wayback Machine today, and we're going to be discussing all things old computers and old cameras and old video editors and all sorts of old stuff, because we want to talk about where we are and where we came from and how we got there, and the comparisons, just so you can sit back and go, wow, what a time we live in. I mean, think about this right now. You have in your pocket or on your desk a smartphone that is a better camera than professional cameras were, 20, 30 years ago. Think about that for a second. And not only do you have a great camera, you've got more storage. The old cameras, I mean, you had to change tapes after, maybe you were lucky. Maybe you'd get 2 hours. Well, you can get a heck of a lot more than 2 hours, and it's 4K video on my phone. I mean, it's amazing where we've come from. And we could take that video and we can instantly broadcast it to the entire world. Mm-hmm. When I graduated high school back in 1992, to put that in perspective, there was a lot of things going on in the world. That was the Barcelona Olympics. It was the release of products like the Philips CDI, if you remember that. It was the release of the Amiga 1200 and 4000s, which were computers that are going to play a big part in what we talk about today. It was the release of all sorts of really cool things, and it was a changing world, but boy, oh boy, it was a world without YouTube, it was a world without Facebook, it was a world without Twitter, it was a world without cell phones, kind of. It was a world without, I said YouTube already, but it was a world without any of these things. Live video was not around. Even real video wasn't around. And if you remember real video, that was the terrible stuff from, the mid-90s, and that wasn't even around yet. I mean, just think about that. When I graduated high school, okay, we were more than 20 years away from YouTube being released. More than 20 years.
40
That's incredible. That's incredible. Think about that. So where did we come from? Well, let's look at what we were doing back in the early 90s, because that's kind of my heyday for this, the late 80s, early 90s. Even going back to the late 80s, the way that I got started, and Steve, I know you came from more of a radio background. But the way that I got started actually started in probably around 1988 or so, when two things happened. I graduated from my Commodore 64 over to the Amiga 500 computer. Now, if you don't know what that is, that was a computer by Commodore after the Commodore 64. And the reason, well, let's be honest, the reason it was popular at the beginning was because it played better video games than anything else out there at the time. But the point is, you got your hands on this thing and you could learn how to do things like design graphics, create animation, edit video, all of that stuff inside a computer, which was unheard of at the time. 1992, you were talking about Apple computers with, black and green screens, one color. You were talking about CGA graphics, really, at that point. If you remember, if you don't know anything about CGA or EGA graphics on your Windows PC computers, which Windows was out then, barely. Windows was barely out at that point, but most of it was DOS at that point still. You're talking about these 16 colors you could use on a computer, and they were these garish bright pinks and bright greens, and if you created graphics, it looked like some sort of bizarre outer space world with everything was these weird colors and whatnot. And now all of a sudden you got something where you could design in 4,000 colors, and you could actually put images on your screen, and you could animate things. And, it changed my world. I wanted to play video games. That's what I wanted to do, Steve. I don't know about you. You probably, that's probably before your time a little bit, or after your time a little bit. But I wanted to play the best video games. But very, very quickly, I started to see, holy cow, forget these video games. I can make presentations, and I can create these animations, and I can design graphics, and I can do all of these cool things. I can take video. I can record my voice. And this is all stuff that couldn't be done up until this point. Yeah, I mean, people had video cameras and 8mm, film cameras before that, but this was the first time where you could really design something that looked like television, for lack of a better word. Did it really? No, of course it was very amateurish, but it was something that couldn't even be thought of before this. I would be able to create video and then put lower thirds on the video with a computer. I mean, it was amazing. It was mind blowing at the time. And of course, we were all using VHS cameras, right? And the professional world was using super VHS cameras, which we've talked about a little bit in the past. But what did we do with all this stuff? Well, we would, you would shoot video on your camera, and that was pretty much it. Nobody had the ability to edit videos. If somebody sneezed in the middle of your video, guess what? It was probably going to stay there unless you had high-end video equipment and you had a studio to work in. It was going to stay there. If somebody fell over, oh well, it's in the video. Nothing you can do about it, really. Now, there were some hack options where you could take one VCR and another VCR and pause it and, things like that to copy things over. But boy, oh boy, the other part of that is you lost quality if you did that. You have VHS cameras taking, video that really didn't look good in the first place, and now you're copying it, and every time you made a copy, that video got worse and worse and worse. Whereas nowadays, you could take a video in your computer and make 800 different versions of it, and they're all going to be identical quality. Well, not in those days. You had a mess. And think about that for a second. VHS, that terrible formula, now, like the old, photocopying a photocopy, it's the same thing with those videos. They get worse and worse the more you do it. The luminance starts to overtake everything. Everything starts looking whiter and brighter, and next thing you know, you've got hardly anything left. If you used a cheap tape, the tape was actually going to start to fall apart a little bit, and you'd get all sorts of noise in the image. I mean, it was just not good at all. But it was revolutionary to us. We loved it. We could do things we couldn't do before. My friends and I made tons and tons of movies with VHS or with the 8mm, and I'm talking about the Sony 8mm video, not film. And, we made a lot of movies and videos and things, and boy, was it cool when we could actually take those things and add graphics to them and titles and, dub in music and all sorts of cool things that was just impossible before. And, that's what we did. We made lots of videos that way, and, it was at a time when that was seemingly impossible. And Steve, I don't know about you, but back in your day, people drew on cave walls. They didn't even have any of that kind of stuff.
Cave walls. They had to draw. They had to draw on air. I mean, that was before cave walls.
Wow.
No, I could a couple of stories I've got. My first job out of college was 1982. Took me 9 years to get through college, and anyhow, it was an art studio. And within the art studio, they made slides. This is way before PowerPoint. Yeah. So they would make graphic slides, doing it the old-fashioned way with, cameras mounted on poles and stuff like that. And they made some pretty intricate slides. And then they also had a video editing suite. And I came in there to set up a small sound studio and sell some stuff. We used 3/4-inch tape back in those days. Yeah, we used 3/4-inch tape. But the big story I've got is there was a priest, Jesuit at Creighton University, my alma mater, who helped put on WOW radio back in 1922. Now, he was still alive when I was a freshman at Creighton in 1923. No, 1973. He was still alive. He was retired. But the remnants of what he had built at Creighton was still there. It was off of what used to be the bookstore, which had long moved out of there. And he had wired the entire campus. So carrier current AM radio and then coax cable so that each classroom had a monitor in it, black and white. And they had a switcher that was probably donated from a TV station in the late 50s. Was there such a thing as 2-inch tape?
Well, there was the big reel-to-reel tape that was probably, I don't know if it was 2-inch or not, but there was definitely 1-inch.
There was, for some reason I have it in my head it was 2-inch, but it was
there could have been a 2-inch format.
And he had a bunch of those in there. And there was a time when if you were teaching a class, all you had to do was let them know, and if you're going to show a film, they'd show a film from the TV studio. And so they were showing educational videos all over the campus on a classroom basis. This was gone by the time I got there, but the monitors were still, all the infrastructure was still there. And the radio station was big on interviewing people on campus, playing classical music. And then they would get these transcriptions of lectures, on disc. I would guess it was 33 1/3. But the neat thing, since I'm an old radio guy, it was a 1947 Collins board that was donated by KFAB in the 50s. We still had it my freshman and sophomore year. But the neat thing was to see all this old equipment and how it worked. All black and white, late 50s. Yeah. And to think what he was able to do with this clunky analog equipment, which was basically feed out lectures to any classroom they wanted at pretty much any time they wanted. Schools are doing that now, but they're doing it with iPhones and simpler ways of transmit. They're transmitting it all out digitally, but they're doing that now in schools. Sure, so that's kind of cool.
No, it's interesting the way it's come, and by the way, we think of this boom period from 2005 when YouTube was released, and then the iPhones started coming out, and the Android phones, and all this stuff started to build up, and the world changed. But it wasn't the first time that I'd seen that happen. If we go back to 1987, there was no computer video. And by the time that I got to college and, for my field of study after I graduated, so somewhere in 1993 or whatever, they were all computerized then. All of our video was computerized. So 5 years earlier, there wouldn't have been anything like that. It still was traditional tape to tape and hardware switching and everything else. And within that short period of time, we went to, having computers that did things, and there was the Avids that were out there. And believe it or not, we actually had some at that point, and I was talking about how in 1985, 86, 87, the Mac, the Apple Mac was still black screen with green writing, and that was it. By the time that I was in college there, now we had Macs full color in there that were running Adobe Premiere. It was terrible. It was absolutely awful. But it was there. It was a primitive version of Adobe Premiere, and that's what everybody got to use because they were abundant and I'm going to say this, they were Macs, they were cheap. They were cheap. They were inexpensive, and when you don't think about that when you talk about Apple computers, you don't think of inexpensive. But compared to a $100,000 Avid system, a $2,000 Mac was pretty cheap. On the other side of that, we had the video toasters, which if you don't know what that is, that was for the Commodore Amiga computers, there was a company called NewTek. There still is a company called NewTek. They make Lightwave 3D, and they make the TriCaster. The TriCaster is a portable hardware video switching and live streaming tool, which basically is the successor of the video toaster. That's what the video toaster eventually became after, years of innovations and changes. But back in those days, we had what was called the video toaster, and it was a card that went into at the time, a Commodore Amiga 2000, and that card would allow you to plug your cameras into that card, and you could have on screen a switcher. So you would have a video monitor to see your video, you'd have a computer monitor to see the program, and you'd have a switcher, and you'd have buses, and by buses I mean on a hardware switcher that you've probably seen on TV. When you see a control room, you see the big hardware switcher. A bus is a channel, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's different things in those. So maybe bus 1 is camera 1, and bus 2 is camera 2, and bus 3 is computer generated graphics, whatever. Well, this computer thing had multiple buses in there, so you could switch between camera A and camera B, or VCR A and VCR B, and add in graphics and overlay graphics and do transitions and all that stuff. Something just unheard of at the time, being able to do that. I mean, just amazing that you could sit there and edit these videos using a computer. Now, on top of that, there was this was still not nonlinear editing. This particular program that I'm talking about here, this was pre-nonlinear editing. So I did mention at this point we had Macs with Adobe Premiere, so they had nonlinear editing in there. And what we mean by nonlinear editing is, in the old days, if I was a cameraman and I was shooting a commercial for you, I would go out and I would shoot, let's say, the owner of the company talking about the business. Then I would take that tape out of my camera. I would switch to another tape. This is where the word B-roll comes from. If you ever think about A-roll and B-roll, when people say, oh, we're going to shoot B-roll, originally it comes from film, but in this case we're talking about tape. You would have a B tape that you would put in, and then you would shoot in the business. You'd take pictures of people working, you'd take pictures of the outside, take pictures of whatever, and then you would go back into a studio, an editing suite, and you would literally have 3 VCRs in there. One for your A tape, one for your B tape, and then one to record everything from A and B together. And you would have a switcher in between, and you'd show the guy on screen, and the guy'd be, oh yeah, my business is the most fantastic thing. We do this, that, and the other thing. And you would physically switch to the other tape while he's talking about this, so that you'd see the other images, and that would be recorded onto the other VCR. Guess what happened if you made a mistake?
Sorry, I had my microphone on mute. You'd have to shoot it all over. You'd have to start all over again.
Yeah, you'd have to start the final edit all over again, right from scratch, and go back and do it again until you got it right. And it was a big fat pain in the neck. But that's what's called linear editing. You can't, you just have to. It's all running, and you do it linearly. Now, the opposite side of that is nonlinear editing started to pick up, and that's where what we see today, where you take video, you put it into a computer, and you can move different clips around and do whatever you want with it. That was starting to pick up, and that's why we had Adobe Premiere. Well, at the same time, the video toaster systems that we're talking about, they had come out with something called the Video Toaster Flyer, and this was all the stuff in that original video toaster where you could have multiple inputs and VCRs and graphics and, music and everything else. But now you also had the nonlinear editing in there as well, so you could do all sorts of amazing things, and it was just incredible what you could do. And it was still, for lack of a better, still inexpensive. The Mac with Adobe Premiere did terrible video. The video was just awful on it. It was low resolution. It was crappy. It took forever to render out and everything. And you were still paying, $2,500 for the Mac and $1,000 for Adobe Premiere. So you're $3,500 in. Now, on the other side of that, if you got the Amiga 4000s at that point in time, you're probably picking those up for $2,000 as well. You're getting the Toaster Flyer cards in there for probably another $2,000, so you're already at $4,000. So you're going to be spending a little bit more than the Mac, but it's going to do 100 times more, much easier at that point in time. And still a lot cheaper than a $100,000 Avid system, which, by the way, for those of you that are video techs and you love Avid, Avids always sucked. I'm sorry, they were awful. They were crappy. The video was not good on them. But for whatever reason, they got the big name at the time, and it was just, they weren't good. It wasn't very good. The Video Toaster video looked a lot better. It was a high resolution, and you could actually do all of your work on it, whereas the Avid, you spent a hell of a lot more money, and you couldn't do half the stuff you wanted to. So it made it difficult. But think about what we're talking about here. We're still talking about shooting on multiple tapes. We're talking about multiple VCRs. We're talking about a little bit of nonlinear editing. But we still didn't have any of the stuff like we have today. You couldn't really do any kind of live streaming unless you had a satellite hookup. And guess what? Unless you were a TV station, you didn't have that. You couldn't do 4K video. You couldn't do 1080p video. You couldn't do 720p video. You were stuck with tiny little square video at low resolution and limited colors and, you name it. It was just not good. Not good at all. But at the time, seemed wonderful, because you could still do things like green screening. You could still do things like adding the graphics as long as you had the computer power to do that. But, it wasn't very easy to do. You had to put in a lot of extra effort just to be able to, output anything that you wanted to use in the end. And then once you did, you were stuck on these tapes. And what are you going to do with that? Now you got to think about this now, okay? Hopefully you were shooting on Super VHS, which was higher resolution, better tape. But a lot of people were shooting on just nice VHS tapes, okay? Now you think about this. If you record on VHS, it's a low resolution format as it is. It's not a high quality tape. Then you're taking that into the editing room and you're doing A-B roll editing onto another VHS tape. So now you're degraded down one level already. Well, now if you want to be able to give that out to people, you got to make copies of that already degraded crappy VHS. So you've gone from bad to a little bit worse and now making copies that are even worse and having to try and, give those out and the quality is just awful at this point in time. Even if you used really nice equipment, the quality was awful. Whereas nowadays, you import your video into your computer, you do what you want to with it, and then you export it out, and you can choose the quality you want. If you want a lower quality so it's a smaller file, you do that. If you want high quality, you put out high quality, but you're not going to lose anything unless you choose to lose some of the quality of that. And even that wasn't always the case, because some video qualities that you shoot with, including on your smartphone, you're already getting compressed video. So you're technically degrading it down a little bit right from there. But you're degrading 4K and HD video, and it's almost unnoticeable, and certainly a lot better than anything you did on Super VHS or VHS back in 1990. So it's just a very, very different world. And the evolution of that, well, we had some evolution to that. Come around, I'm going to say maybe 1995, we started to see digital video formats start to pop up. These would be like your DV formats, the little square digital tapes. And digital 8. So Sony came out with a digital 8mm version. And it even had straight DV, which was bigger tapes. The quality was not any different on a mini DV and a DV, but the tapes were just a different size. And the big tapes were 3 hours, and the small tapes were 30 to 60 minutes. But you now were able to shoot in a much, much nicer format. Still standard definition, so not a high definition format, but the color reproduction was night and day. You didn't lose your quality. It was actually full TV quality. Because one thing people don't understand is your TV is, the resolution nowadays. Okay, if you got a 4K TV, you're talking about 3,800 pixels wide by 2,100 pixels tall. In HD, you're talking about 1,900 pixels across and over 1,000 pixels down. When you go back to standard television, you're talking about 720 pixels across and 480 down. That's tiny, but with VHS, the resolution was not even that. So the resolution was lower than your TV resolution. Well, now with the digital video, the resolution was full standard definition. So you didn't lose that resolution quality. You had a higher resolution, much better color, reproduction and whatnot. And you could just make some amazing videos with those. But you were still stuck with, the lower resolution with the standard definition. People were starting to talk about HD, but it wasn't out yet. Took a little while before that. I can't even remember when they finally put that into as a standard that people had to follow. It was probably around 2000 before they finally did that, I think, but tough to remember. I know for years it was, this is the HD format, it's coming soon, and it didn't. We were stuck with those old formats. But when it came, the cameras followed right suit with that, and we started to get some really nice HD cameras that came out. Now, of course, you got 4K cameras, and, the world is a totally different place. But we've come a long way. I mean, the amount of things that we can do today, if you think about this, okay? Right now, Steve and I are, even though my internet has been terrible today and keeps telling me it's giving out bad juice here. Hopefully the audio is okay for the podcast. But you think about this, Steve and I are in two different parts of the country. We're on video live right now. We're recording a podcast. There are people from all across the world watching this podcast as we do it live on video on Facebook. And then there's going to be, people listening to the podcast or watching the YouTube replay all over the world in a matter of the same day. I mean, that is an incredible difference from 1992, 1996, even 2000, where we were shooting on bad formats, much lower resolution formats, and having to edit things in a primitive way so that we could hopefully give it to somebody on a VHS tape or maybe later on a DVD. And nowadays, we can do this instantaneously. If we don't want to do it instantaneously, we can record it to our hard drives and put it on YouTube a half hour later. The amount of change that we have seen in just the last couple of decades is mind-boggling when it comes to the world of video. You can reach anybody anywhere in the world instantaneously. If you are a business and you want to make a video about your product, you can have it out to the world later this afternoon and everybody can see it. In the old days, by the way, and this is something to think about, when I got out of college, the first job that I had out of college was I worked for the Surgeon General. And we did video conferencing, which required gigantic TVs and all this equipment, and we had to have specialized lines in order to transfer the data because the internet was barely a thing at that point in time. It was a mess. Well, after I worked there for a while, I went and worked at a TV station, and eventually I ended up at an advertising firm, probably in, let's see, probably still around like 2004. Actually, it was close to 2005 because YouTube, I remember when YouTube came out and I was working there when YouTube first came on the scene. So it was around 2004, 2005. I was working for an ad firm. And when I walked in the door and interviewed, they did not have any computers in that facility. Well, I think in the office they did for, typing email or whatever. But there were no computers there yet. And this is in, like I said, around 2004, 2005. They were still shooting on digital tapes, but they were still doing old-fashioned video editing on equipment that took up an entire room. And it was all old school. Now, when they hired me, one of the reasons they hired me was to transition into using computers. And by the time I was hired, the computer was there. But, they didn't have them up until then. And the computer they bought was a disaster, and, it was a big hassle, and a long story there. But point being is, even in 2004, not everybody was even on computers then.
I think that was about the only time. Yeah.
As a matter of fact,
I'll edit that part out when I do the audio podcast.
Well, I think you'll have to, because I think we just lost the transmission, and it picked back up now. So we were off the air for a split second there. My internet's terrible today, which is.
Oh, were we? Okay.
Yeah. So I think we'll have two things there. But point being is, the world has changed much greater, much for the better. And nowadays, we are an extremely lucky people when it comes to the world of video, that we can produce pretty much anything we want. There are people that produce movies with their smartphones and their computers. And the fact that you can do that when just a couple decades ago you were lucky to even get a recording on a tape is an absolutely amazing thing. So we just want to do a nice little retrospective here, talk about where we've come from and talk about where we are so that we can truly appreciate it. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's a very different type of episode. We're not teaching you anything specific other than a little bit of history. And hopefully, even with my internet issues today, which is the perfect day for internet issues to be bad as we talk about all these things. But hopefully, you had a little bit of fun.
You got
a
better.
little bit of the message. Yeah, it got better.
After we popped off and it came back, it's a lot better right now.
Well,
so,
I'm looking at the actual numbers, and it's really not any better. We're still like way
much better on my end.
Yeah,
a little story. I from 82 to 87, my first job out of college. This was a great job to have, an art studio that sold industrial films. Here's a tour of the meatpacking plant, and they had a small editing studio. And if they needed something more, they'd go down to the TV station, and use their equipment. And they did slides, and they had a little sound studio, and they had a printing company. So I got to try my hand at selling all of those services. Nice. And then I kind of discovered I was really good at selling commercial printing. And so in 87, I got out of that, got on the commercial printing side, and it was just graphic arts and kind of old school graphic arts from then on, and then direct mail. And then in 2010, when I got out of that business, sort of retired, I started looking at YouTube. Imagine my surprise how things had changed in those, 23 years, going from 3/4 inch tape, and doing everything analog, and you can only step on things so many times, to YouTube, and YouTube being able to compress the videos so you could actually upload them and watch them. And I don't know, what was a Grass Valley switcher back in the 80s? I mean, it was a lot of money. $15,000?
Thousands.
Yeah, thousands of dollars.
And they had different ones. They had smaller ones that were much cheaper, but yeah, the really good ones, I mean, 10,000, 15, 20,000.
Yeah, and we had at the art studio, we had their smallest one. It handled 90% of what we did. But then all of a sudden, okay, I'm an old radio guy. I got Sony Vegas Movie Maker. I got the $40 version that's great for editing audio, and it's got a basic video editor for my screen capture videos. $40. If I really wanted to get fancy, $200. And there was a time you had to spend $15,000 on that. So yeah, it's a different world. And
it's changed it on the other side of that too, because that company I talked about that was just getting into computers, they were used to charging $50,000, $100,000 to do a 30-second commercial, and now some kid in his basement could do it for these car companies or whatever for $2,000. So they had to make a lot of transitions when it came to that, not just changing equipment, but changing an entire mindset.
Now, a buddy of mine, he's probably mid-50s, and he started off when he was in high school doing videos, and he made the transition to every single technology as it came down the pike. So probably from the mid-'80s all the way up till now. And I remember what he had in the mid-'80s, and I look at what he has now. He had a room full of stuff. A big room full of stuff. Now, it's you know what it takes. He's got basically a setup like yours now, and he uses his iPhone. It's just totally different.
It absolutely is, and we love it, and it's a great time. I don't think in 1985 you ever would have seen my face on any sort of video, and now I broadcast all over the world. So
yeah, we both have
go.
faces for radio. Faces for radio. Yeah, little jokes. Very
all right. Well, speaking of jokes, this entire episode is drawing to a close. We hope you had fun with it. We hope you enjoyed this little retrospective. And by the way, if you're watching this, let us know what you were doing in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s with video, if you were doing anything at all.
Here's John. He made a comment on Facebook. Back in the 60s, I was shooting video with Super 8 video, but no sound on my inexpensive GI Yakusha. Yakusha? Is that how you say it?
Gosh, that was back when John was like only 70. So
yeah. Now look at him.
Unbelievable.
Stuff,
it's amazing the things that have changed and the things that we have. I'll tell you, what a different world it is. I do have to say one thing though before we get out of here. As great as it is right now, as powerful as these things are, there is one thing that's really missing from today's video experience. And that is, back then it was a challenge, and there was a real challenge to doing some of the things that we did. And, oh, look what I can do. I can do this amazing stuff with my, and now my daughter on her laptop at home makes these videos that are just amazing. And so there is that. There is that one thing that's missing from that. It's almost like, we talked about how my transition into the world of video started with being a video gamer back in the 80s, playing video games on my Commodore 64 and whatnot. Nowadays, things are so easy to do that there's no challenge to it anymore. You can have video games. They all look great. There's no, oh, look, look at the graphics on this one. Well, they all have good graphics. It doesn't matter anymore. Back then, it was a challenge to make good graphics. It was a challenge to make good video. And you could really impress people by, doing things and really messing with hardware and software. And nowadays, it's almost too easy. But, just my perspective.
What was that song? What was that song by Dire Straits? I Want My MTV or something. Was that the name of it?
No, it was, I forget the name
Money
of the
for
song.
Nothing.
Money for Nothing.
Money for Nothing. And they had an animated version on MTV. And so, we just thought it was amazing. And I saw it on YouTube.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I saw it on YouTube. It looked pretty trite.
Well, and I believe
it was amazing. Yeah.
I believe that was done with the video toaster that we were talking about earlier.
Was it? Yes, that's
I believe so.
right. Yes.
That was like, if you remember, if you watched the old Home Improvement show, where they had all the weird transitions, like the ladder flying through. That was all video toaster. That's what all that was, and that was amazing back then. Whoa, look at that! The ladder's flying into the screen.
Well, nobody had done it before.
Yep. No, it's a very different world. So. All right. Well, with that, we're going to bring this episode to a close because I've got a webinar I've got to do in 10 minutes. And so we're going to get over to that. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you had fun with this, let us know because, this is not the normal thing that we do. Typically, we're talking about a specific thing to help you with your videos or help you with local marketing or what have you. If you had fun with this, let us know because we want to have fun once in a while. Maybe not all the time. We'll be a little more serious, but let us know if you like this, and maybe we'll do some more of these things in the future. Maybe we should start doing is like a retro review. Start reviewing like ancient hardware or something like that, and just kind of show off all the great features from the day. Who knows? But speaking 64. Of old features, video on the Commodore 64. We'll have to do that. By the way, if anybody. And here's a weird plug. If anybody has an old Commodore 64 or an old Amiga, reach out to me. I'm looking to get some original hardware right now. Most of my original hardware got lost in a move a while back, and some I'd sold off, and now I wish I had my hands on them. So if you have any of those types of things, let me know. Even if you're watching this 3 months from now, let me know. I thought I had my hands on one shortly, a little while ago, and we may still end up with that, but who knows? All right, with that, let's hit that music. But before we do, remember, folks, today's episode is made possible by our friends at FreshBooks. And if you want to be able to send invoices, if you want to be able to send things like proposals and get them approved, or you want to start taking recurring billing, if you want to start collecting those credit cards so that you can get paid without having to chase people down, check out FreshBooks, because I moved from QuickBooks to FreshBooks because of these very features, and I love it. I think it's great. And I actually had my first recurring billing automatically go through yesterday, so I know it works now. It's been a little over a month since I joined FreshBooks and got my first recurring, which was nice. I didn't send the bill. I didn't ask to be paid. The bill went out, and it was paid. Actually, the bill went out, but it was paid automatically without even him getting the bill, just because his card was on file.
Wow.
Boom. It was nice. Which, I mean, that doesn't sound like a very unique feature, because you can do that with YouTube, and you can, with PayPal, and you can do that with Stripe. But you couldn't do it with QuickBooks. I couldn't do it inside of there. This does that inside of FreshBooks for you automatically, so it's a very nice feature. So highly recommend you check out FreshBooks. If you haven't yet, head on over to raiselinks.com/FreshBooks, and you can start it for free. You don't even have to put a credit card in. Just make an account. Go to the link, make an account, try it out. They won't even know who it really is. So if you decide to walk away later and you don't decide to buy it, they're not going to take money from you, and you're not going to have to try and get it back from them. You don't even have to put a card in. Just try it out. raiselinks.com/FreshBooks. And with that, we're going to hit the Ray the Video Guy theme song right now.
He's Ray the Video Guy, yeah, Ray the Video Guy. His skill is where it's at, even if he's a little fat. He's filled with video expertise and has so much knowledge that you need. His YouTube ninja tricks can make your marketing so sick. He's Ray the Video Guy, yeah, Ray the Video Guy.